I'm Catherine Reid, host of the St. Paul Forum, and coming up this week, I'm speaking with Deepinder Singh, CEO of 75F. Hi, I'm Catherine Reid, host of the St. Paul Forum, and joining me this week is Deepinder Singh, CEO of 75F. Welcome.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Well, I got to see you on a competition run by Steve Case called Rise of the Rest. It was a competition about startup companies in Minnesota, and you were the winner of that competition.
Right.
How has it been to be the winner?
It's been a fantastic ride, Catherine. I mean, Steve's been absolutely amazing for us, not in terms of just the Rise of the Rest competition itself, but the opportunities that he's really opened up for us. We were fortunate enough to present first at South by Southwest.
Oh, is that where you first presented? Afterward. Okay.
Afterwards, right. Mm-hmm. And thanks to Steve Case. And then 2 weeks ago, we actually presented at Google.
Oh my gosh.
Right, so it was Google Demo Day. We were one of 12 companies chosen to present over there.
Well, just to let everyone else in on what we're talking about, again, you have won both the Minnesota Cup and this entrepreneurial competition, the Rise of the Rest.
Right.
What is the idea that has won you this attention?
Right. I mean, we essentially speaking let everyone in their offices have their own individual temperature control system, right, while saving about 40% in energy. So the way we say it is, it's basically as the Nest meets Sleep Number.
So the concept is, what I was so intrigued with, the name itself means 75 degrees is right. Optimum. That's really what 75F represents for most human beings that are operating in an office setting. And another thing I was really struck by is I spent a lot of time in the central part of the Twin Cities, which is full of warehouses.
Sure.
Warehouses that are going to be repurposed or
right.
torn down. And in those settings, temperature control is virtually impossible because right. they're very large, high-ceilinged. They weren't designed for people to inhabit, essentially. Right. So talk us sort of slowly through what that idea is about, the idea that you got to turn this into a commercial enterprise.
Right. I mean, the whole idea is that, as you said, basically most places, the thermal loads or the heat loads within the building keep changing, right? So essentially speaking, your HVAC system, however, is designed for a static set of conditions. So normally speaking, in one office building, you have one single thermostat, and somebody or the other, people who are away from the thermostat, are always complaining. Because the thermostat maintains the temperature in that one particular place. But other parts of the building where people actually end up living, just like in your home, the thermostat might reside in the hallway, but where you're actually in the living room or in the bedrooms, those temperatures actually vary from the hallway, mm-hmm. right? And more importantly, those temperatures vary on a day-to-day basis. So even if you were to able to adjust the airflow or the damper HVAC settings in a manner that works for one particular kind of day, the very next day or within the same day, it's going to change, right?
Right.
In the morning, the east part of the building gets more solar gain. So that's going to rise up in temperature. Right? In the later part of the day, the west gets more solar gain, so that rises up in temperature. So what you really need is to make sure that your friendly HVAC technician becomes a gremlin running around the ductwork, readjusting it every minute of the day. And that's what we really did. What we've done is we've designed a system that basically takes the conditioning air and puts it to parts of the building that need it the most.
And what's so impressive to me about the designs that I saw, again, I saw you present in, what did they give you? 10 minutes? Not even that. I don't remember. 5 minutes to tell your story. What I was impressed with, because I was sitting thinking about these buildings that I'm surrounded by in my setting, is that it's not tearing out all kinds of ductwork. It's not an invasive process that you've designed. Can you help people picture in their minds what this looks like? Because it felt more like satellite dishes or something.
Right. And that's absolutely true. I mean, we have 4 different pieces to the puzzle. The first is what we call a centralized control unit. And that actually replaces the existing thermostat in the building. It forms the local brains of the system, and it actually controls the HVAC system, so it turns on and off your air conditioning or heating, whatever is required. The second piece is a room module, and that goes into the walls in each of the rooms. So it actually senses the temperature, and it allows each occupant to set their own desired temperature.
And that's where the sleep number concept comes in. So you're saying that room monitor is something that however many are in there can have an input without getting into a fight?
Each individual office will have their own.
Each office
will have their own separate thing. So if you are in a room, you will have your own individual room module, and the person in the next office can have their own separate room module with their own desired temperature. And the third piece that we have is we have what we call smart dampers that install into the ductwork. They open and close like a fan, but they essentially regulate the amount of air which is coming into each room. Right? So these three pieces form the physics of how things happen. And then we actually have the real brains. And what ends up happening is we take the temperatures which are coming in different parts of the building, and we load it to servers in the cloud. Every night, we run our proprietary algorithms, and we crunch this historical data, and we figure out how the building behaves, or what's called a thermal model of the building. We then look at the forecast weather, and we predict how the building is going to behave the next day. Right? So at that point, I mean, we've figured out an optimal control strategy that decides what's the best way of controlling the HVAC equipment that will give each person in their own office their own individual temperature while saving a lot of energy. In this case, we save about 40% in energy.
40% savings is so remarkable. And I guess what really struck me, now that we've kind of gotten just an overview, what really struck me about your presentation was so much about the genius behind it, that given our environmental, we're kind of at Earth Day tomorrow as we tape this show. Everyone is concerned about what are we going to do, and there seems to be this fight between oil and alternatives. You kind of just came right down the middle and have this very pragmatic approach that isn't radically changing things that we're already doing, in a sense. You're basically saying, I get it. People's behavior doesn't change that rapidly, so why don't we make it easier for you to achieve the outcomes you want to achieve? And the cost savings is just got to be eye-popping to people. Is that what captures people's attention first about what you're doing?
I think you actually hit the nail on the head, that the core is that people are not necessarily ready to make a big change which is sustainable. Right? So far, energy conservation has always been a prescriptive pill. It's been the bitter pill that you got to turn down the thermostat, you got to feel uncomfortable, and that's how you save energy. Or you got to drive down at 60 miles an hour, right? And so on. But those behaviors are great for short-term modification. In the long run, we tend to go back to our baseline, which is increased comfort. Right? So one of the things that we did was that we decided that we want to give people increased comfort. Right? So what's the best way of selling a solution is making sure that the people get what they want. So our idea is that we give people that increased comfort. Right? Let the energy savings that we do occur in the background. Like as an example, if you went to our website and you looked at the testimonials from the people who are using it, they're all about comfort. Nobody ever talks about energy savings.
No,
right? And because that energy savings is all occurring in the background without them even noticing. What they're experiencing is the day-to-day comfort that they're getting out of it. So the three pieces that we believe any energy conservation piece needs to have is it needs to provide increased comfort, it needs to save energy, and it needs to be non-disruptive. And that's the other key that you highlighted, right? That it's wireless, it's relatively easy to retrofit, because you can't ask people to stop doing what they're doing just so they can install a new product. And that's been one of the key things with the current HVAC control systems. They take hours to set up for a single room, right? And the entire project could drag on for weeks. In our case, we could come into a building and we'd be done in a single day or over a week.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
It's that quick?
It's that quick.
Oh my gosh. I don't know, to me your project just sells itself. I have a psychology background, and everything you're talking about is just makes so much sense to me, because you've overcome so many important barriers to why we don't do what we really need to do. So that's what impressed me about your work so much.
Thank you.
I'd love to find out a little bit more about where your ideas have come from.
Sure.
First of all, I'm interested in where did you grow up? Did you ever envision yourself? What was comfort? What drove you as a child?
Right. So I grew up in India. Of course, I did my engineering over there. Then I moved over to Canada, and I was very happily employed with Verizon. So we'll take a couple of steps back, and it's an interesting story of how we ended up in Mankato.
Yes, I was going to say, you're based in Mankato, so.
Right. And my wife is a physician, so she had finished her fellowship. She's a cardiologist. So she was looking for her first job. I was a Canadian at that point, and I was on the Canadian national shooting team.
Oh.
Right. And I was training to go to the Olympics. I wanted to go to Beijing. So for that, we were looking at our first house, so we decided that I wanted a place where I could shoot in the backyard. So we started looking at all these small towns where we could do that, and we ended up in Mankato. And we're actually outside the city limits, so I can crank open the basement windows and shoot into the woods at the back.
Did you ever make it to the Olympics?
I never did. I went to the Pan American Games.
You did?
Yeah, you actually have to earn a quota spot. And at that point, I was competing with both the US and the rest of the Americas as well. But Jason Turner beat me at the Pan American Games. He went on actually to win the bronze at the Olympics. So definitely the better man to have gone.
You were pleased in any case. You could be a good loser in that sense.
Right.
So how long is it that you've been in Mankato, and what was when did you start the entrepreneurial ventures?
Right. So we've been there about 8 years now, a little over 8 years, 8.5. My daughter had just turned 2 months when we moved to Mankato.
Oh my.
Right. So she was a newborn, but when she turned about 1 year, we moved her into her own room. So the story goes that she would actually wake up crying in the middle of the night. And as an engineer, I had to figure out what was going on. And I found out that basically the temperature in her room would drop about 10 degrees at night. So the thermostat was in the master bedroom, but the temperature in her room would drop 10 degrees at night. So she'd be uncomfortable and she'd wake up crying. So as an engineer, I had to fix the problem, right? So
we can stop right there for a second and note, an engineer cannot let it sit. I've observed that.
You observe, right? So as an engineer, I had to make a product that fixed that problem. And as a self-respecting engineer, now you have to form a company so that other people can have access to the product and say how good it is. So that's what we did. We actually started a company, and the company was called Santolit. And that was really about residential zone control systems. So you'd basically work in homes and allow each room in the house to have their own temperature control. And we did quite well with that. We actually ended up winning what's called the GE Eco-Imagination Award worldwide out of 5,000 entries.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that about the history. Okay. So you've done really well in these competitions. I'm very impressed.
Right.
So that was you say it again, GE worldwide.
It's called the GE Eco-Imagination Award.
Eco-Imagination Award.
And that was, and at one point we were talking with GE and Best Buy to produce and distribute the product. But then, essentially speaking, the residential market was really soft. This is post the crash.
Was it post the crash?
Post the crash. So essentially speaking, that's when we pivoted and changed focus, and we said the light commercial market is probably what we want to target. Mm-hmm. It's a large enough market. They have the same kind of problems. And most of the people, the current HVAC control systems are really focused on the Class A buildings, big buildings, skyscrapers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But 90% of the commercial buildings in the US are really light commercial buildings.
There you go. If you're just joining us, I'm speaking with Deepinder Singh of 75F about their new product. So that's also another eye popper, that it's such a large.
Right.
Again, I was sitting in the audience going, oh my gosh, yes. Let's talk just briefly about the Minnesota Cup, if we can,
Sure.
and we'll come back to this marketplace you're talking about and how the ideas have unfolded. How far along were you in the work when you ended up doing the Minnesota Cup? You won a year ago, or is it 2 years?
Right. We won last year's
Minnesota Cup.
Minnesota Cup.
So maybe you could just briefly explain what the Minnesota Cup is, because the competition is just now opening up again.
Absolutely.
So give people a chance to, or curious to, look into it. What is the Cup?
So the Minnesota Cup is a statewide competition which basically encourages startup companies. And the idea is you end up going through the competition originally, I guess, for the notoriety and the cash prize, which is substantial. It's $50,000 for the top honors, and there's a category division winner, which gets another $30,000 as well. So it's a substantial amount. As an example, we ended up with $80,000 last year. So that is substantial, but also there's a camaraderie and there's a process of honing down. One of the interesting things with the Minnesota Cup is the mentoring, right? As a startup, there are so many things that you could be doing. One of the best things you could do is find good mentors.
Yes.
Because nothing beats that. The problem is having access to those mentors. How do you find them? And what the Minnesota Cup has really done is that for all the participants who actually end up getting selected to present, which are substantial, I mean, there could be about 6 people per division, 6 divisions, so 36 people who end up getting paired with very good mentors.
Wow.
Right? People from Fortune 50, Fortune 10, who are absolutely volunteering their time. Top level, C-level executives who are doing that. So you get insight, you get relationships with people at a level that you would have absolutely no access to otherwise.
So who can you share with us who your mentor or mentors are?
Right, absolutely. Ours was Mary Pat Blake. She was exceptional. She actually worked with the a cable company, and they actually made it public. So Mary was great, and then another gentleman, Bob French, he was my mentor. And interestingly, Mary continues to mentor us still, right? So we meet often enough. She's a marketing whiz. She headed that marketing for those guys. And Bob had started multiple startups of his own.
Okay, so he had that background.
He had that background, and what Bob ended up doing was he actually left his own company, and he's working with us full time.
Oh no! He is really a believer.
Yeah,
that is fantastic.
Yes.
So what's his role then? What is his specialty? I mean, he's had other startups, but does he have a skill set that he's particularly bringing to you, or is it the accumulation of his experiences?
He is Bob is currently our chief evangelist, which is a role.
I like that job.
Right,
that's a good one.
Which befits him. I mean, he pitches in as a startup. I mean, there is very little vertical delineation, right? So essentially speaking, you have to be a jack of all trades. And Bob's absolutely fantastic. That more importantly, he gets the technology pieces. He gets the bigger idea, and he's absolutely fantastic with customers. So he is, I mean, if I could say, mirror me, that would be Bob right now.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Oh, how fabulous.
Yes.
He was from here, Bob?
That's right.
Yeah, okay. So the competition, there was the process, there's an application, then there's a selection, the narrowing down to the smaller number.
Right.
Then there's a more public, there's some behind the scenes work. Then you actually present, and there's kind of a voting. Is that kind of how it works?
Absolutely.
There's an audience involvement and so forth.
There is an audience involvement in terms of the People's Choice Award, but what ends up happening is you present to a select group of judges, right? They're all from the industry, so people from the venture community, people, investment lawyers, so on. So people who understand startups. So essentially speaking, it is for startups a beauty contest, so to say, but at the same time, what they're really looking at is which is the most viable, likely to succeed company. So it's a vetting process for that. And you're right, the behind the scenes work is really, there's a lot of requirements in terms of what the ask is, right? Because you have to submit a business plan, you have to do financial sense stuff. But those are things that any entrepreneur really should do.
Yes.
Right? We always hesitate about those things because we focused on the core area. But I mean, if you want to be successful, if you want that to be a long-term business, then those are the things that you have to do. And the interesting thing is that even if it seems daunting, that's what the mentors are for, right? Because they've seen it, they know exactly what is required, so they can guide you through the process. So if anyone's willing to put in the hard work, I mean, the outcome is well worth it, because that basic grasp of the business comes from having gone through that process.
That's great.
Right.
I could really sense also that you were very willing to go through that process. That was something else that really showed. It's hard to say how that shows up on a 5-minute presentation, but I could sort of sense that you were not reluctant to do that, and I think that probably is another reason why people wanted to see you succeed at what you're doing. So because I think that one of the things I think most people think is that there's an overnight success, and clearly it's not overnight success, but you learn and then you grow and you adapt and so forth. So you've been doing this phase for 3 years now, this commercial phase.
The commercial phase, that's right.
Where are you already? You are already installing product. You
Absolutely.
have been for some time. Is that right?
We launched in March of last year, so we're absolutely commercially
And so where are your customers coming from?
coming in from all over the place, but regionally focused. We're only focused around 2 markets, which is Minnesota and Illinois.
Oh, you are.
Right,
You're staying very focused then.
We are very focused. Rather than spread ourselves thin, what we decided was we wanted depth. We wanted things to make sure that we can develop and replicate things closer to hand, rather than spread ourselves thin and have like support calls and logistical issues coming in from all over the country. So after that, it's a question of replication. What you really need to do is see, how deep can you go? Do you understand your customers? Can you penetrate those markets before going wide?
Fabulous. And I would think there's plenty of work locally.
There is, absolutely, and every time it's a learning experience. And what was interesting is you mentioned this thing about me being open to learning. And that, I believe, is the attitude you need to take. If you're opening a startup, my first thing was, what am I going to learn? Right? You have your core strengths as an engineer. You already know the engineering of the product. You develop the algorithms. That part is very attractive. But if you want to grow as an individual, then there are pieces as an engineer we could do better, right? The people skills, the financials, all the things that I would deride as an engineer, but which are important to making a sustainable company. I mean, all those are things I had to learn. And that, to me, is one of the most exciting pieces now of a startup, is things which are outside my comfort zone, which were not necessarily things that I'd learned either in college, or in your life before. I mean, but those are the skills that you need to make a company successful.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's a lesson, and you should be speaking to some management groups too to help them understand that. How many employees do you have now?
We have 5 people here in the US, and we have 11 in India on the engineering side.
On the engineering side, so it is an international company.
It is,
then.
absolutely.
So your roots in India have been helpful?
They absolutely have. My co-founder, Pankaj, is based out of Bangalore, and he used to be my roommate. So
he used to be your what?
He was my roommate in university. So
oh, great! Yeah, so you've had this history. So that's also the myth of the garage. No, it was actually the college dorm room. Or,
right. I mean, at least we've known each other.
You've known each other. That's really what I meant.
Right.
Very exciting. And my understanding is you're growing, and that there are some opportunities.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the extras. We are growing very rapidly, so we have openings for all kinds of people. We're looking for summer interns in engineering. We're looking for, and these are all paid internships, well-paid internships. In engineering, we're looking for people in marketing. We're looking for people in PR. We're looking for people doing videos. And in addition, we have open positions for sales and support people, full-time positions as well. So all manners of goodies, all on our website.
Fantastic. So if they want to find out more about those positions, where would they go?
They would end up at our website, www.75f.io.
Okay. Well, we'll put that up on the screen and let people see it. And we'll also hopefully show at least one picture of what your system looks like, so that they can picture what I'm seeing in my own mind. But that's very exciting. So what have you found? I'm just curious, kind of what kind of talent do you feel works best for your company? What are some values or qualities you're looking for?
People who don't like structure, or who can live without structure, I would say. I mean, those are the key things, because there is very little structure, right?
Because you're growing so quickly.
It's growing so quickly. I mean, every day we decide something, and then 2 weeks later we realize that it's obsolete. Right?
And I just want to jump in and say the jobs are primarily in Burnsville rather than Mankato. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you have a site in Burnsville. So people watching here are going to mostly be in the metro area, so they don't have to go to Mankato to
Thank you
do
for the
work.
clarification.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I asked you too. So no structure, and that's so counter to being an engineer.
It is, and it's not, right? I mean, this is the world we live in.
You follow your curiosity, clearly.
You follow your curiosity,
and
right?
then how are you getting feedback on the you're saying you're listening to customer responses as you're changing your mind about what works and what doesn't.
Right. That's one of the interesting things with us is, I mean, we are very customer focused at this point, which is why we decided to keep a regional focus. So we can actually be involved with the actual customer installs. We listen to them. We actually go on the actual customer sites, and we're actively evolving the product, right? It's interesting. We actually Bob and I were having a discussion, and he said, Deep, it's like, this is still like a prototype. And I said, Bob, that's the beauty of it, right? Because we can add stuff to a prototype.
You can keep adapting it.
Right, we can keep adapting it. That's the beauty of the platform that we've chosen is so flexible. We keep adding features. We keep expanding the possibility of what we are doing every time. Because if we stop, I mean, then what's the joy of having it as a startup? We could have worked for an engineer as a big company and made this gilded product that was closed, right? What we're really doing is saying we've chosen the current technology tools, like we use a lot of Android, we use a lot of cloud computing, right? And we're saying that, I mean, people expect that your apps are going to keep getting refreshed. Why not the capabilities?
Keep refreshing everything.
Yeah, right.
When will you feel, kind of what's your vision out here of when will you feel satisfied about what you've accomplished so far?
I think I'm fairly satisfied, but I hope never to be complacent, right?
So you want, I mean, what kind of, how would it look different if you're really making a success of what you're doing? How will the environment look different?
Right.
Feel, I guess the key word would be feel, right? It's not look,
right.
Because it's how we experience our environment.
Right, I mean, in all honesty, if we were to be deployed in every system in the US alone, a good example, right? We'd end up saving enough energy that we could shut down 29 coal-fired plants. We could keep 22 million cars off the road, or we would save 267 million barrels of oil. So it's a lot of energy. So I mean, that would be true success.
That would be true success.
Right, and that vision that essentially speaking, everyone has embraced this concept, right? Where we are able to do things better without necessarily discomforting people.
That's fantastic. Well, I am very excited about your work, and I wish you all the best. That's all we have time for. Come see us again next week on the St. Paul Forum.